the stakeholders. Of course, and this is the different departments, KRA, we had CRA there, we had Sports Fund, all these people who would be affected directly, all these institutions that would be affected directly by this bill. Mr. Speaker, one thing came out very clearly is that there is a lot of money in gambling. In fact, too much money, Mr. Speaker, to an extent that it was an issue of deciding what percentage of the levy would go to which specific institution, Mr. Speaker. A clear example is we had the members of Sports Fund and the CEO come in to say that, in fact, there is a particular section of the new bill that takes away more than 16 billion from the Sports Fund. Earlier on, the levies would be collected and a big percentage of it would go to Sports Fund to be able to give, facilitate the activities that Sports Fund has, including sporting activities, supporting artists, supporting our young athletes, and all that stuff. So while this bill was being drafted, I think there was an oversight, and they forgot to include the percentage that should still remain in the Sports Fund. So when Sports Fund came to the Labour Committee, they explained this. And Mr. Speaker, one thing that I questioned and I asked them is, yes, this money is generated from sports. This money is generated from gambling, mainly within sporting activity. Do they mean to say that in the absence of gambling, the whole sports fund, because 90% of the sports fund budget comes from gambling? So my question then was, if we were to ban gambling in this country, would we also fold the sports fund? And what would that mean then also for the athletes and the sporting activities that are relying heavily on gambling? And, you know, I know it is an issue of the chicken or the egg, you know, but for me, it was imperative to understand that above and beyond relying on gambling money to be able to support sporting activities, we need to think as a country beyond that. We need to start thinking of income-generating activities around that industry. For instance, look at what some of our notable runners are doing, opening all these training facilities, these training camps, and turning it into a sports tourism kind of economic activity. And those are the things that I was questioning all the stakeholders, asking them, in the absence of gambling, are you going to fold up those institutions? So as much as we are happy, and I've heard Senator Sifuna referencing that we should not regulate, that we are too much on rules, and that, you know, people should be led to be free. No, Mr. Speaker. There is a very, very thin line between an organized society that is responsible for its people and anarchy. So when we are legislating, we are not legislating because we want to get into people's houses to control them. We are legislating because there is a fact here that gambling is destroying our communities. That is a fact. Gambling is actually the source of so many ill activities, the source of so much sorrow in so many households. Women out here are literally having to deal with not only the issue of their spouses having substance abuse, but with the issue of gambling. So as responsible legislators, I want to say that we are not entering the private spaces of people to control who and what they believe in, but what we are doing is we want to be responsible leaders to ensure that even within your freedoms, we are still able to safeguard, for instance, our children. And I'm glad that Senator Karen Nyamu has stood up to clarify that her bill, and even the motion that we were discussing here on Aluta, has nothing to do with adults, but it has everything to do with parents, parenting, and ensuring that our children have safe spaces. Because any child who's under, any person who's under the age of 18 years does not have the capacity. They think they have the capacity, but they do not have the capacity to make decisions to a certain extent. That is why we always say they have to have guardians, they have to have parents, they have to have someone who is responsible for them. So I think it is completely responsible for us as leaders to say that, listen, if you're earning this and you want to spend all of it on gambling, who are we to come in and say yes or no? Yes, it is your freedom, but what we are doing is ensuring that within this space of gambling, there has to be some order in that disorder. Because if you ask me, gambling is a disorder. But okay, we all have rights and there's freedoms. So in this disorder, how then can we ensure that we are responsibly safeguarding the lives of citizens, Mr. Speaker? To hear that a Kenyan, a youthful Kenyan, has actually committed suicide because they've lost a little bit more than 100,000 on gambling, that in itself should touch the minds and the souls of the senators in this house, so that they understand that as much as we are adults, some of us still need to be guided. And that is why within a county, we still elect a governor to be able to lead the people. We still elect a senator to be able to lead the people. Otherwise, we would also say, all these people are adults, they can lead themselves. So I strongly believe that this bill is very timely, and I believe above and beyond the issue of organizing the taxes that are being collected on gambling, it is an issue of trying to direct a society back into the moral path that we need to be in. And when I say moral path, I'm not talking about religion, I'm not talking about biases, I'm talking about some level of financial management within our homes, Mr. Speaker. There are a lot of women and men who are literally sinking the family unit because of gambling. There are children who are being thrown out of schools because their parents have gambled the last coin. There are women who are literally holding on to their last coin because their spouses have gambled everything on. You're talking about the match tonight between Arsenal and Alu. I'm not a football fan. But there are people who would rather say tonight, my family doesn't need to eat meat, because this 250 shillings, I want to place a bet. So in all fairness, this has nothing to do with controlling people and the decisions they make with what they want to do. This has everything to do with the responsibility of us leaders ensuring that our communities are not washed away with the ills of gambling. Mr. Speaker, when we had this conversation with the sports fund, after I questioned them, because it was 16 billion Kenya shillings that they were fighting for to be maintained within the sports fund. You know, 3% of the levies that are collected will go towards the gambling authority. That 3% will cater for the administrative and logistics of running that authority. And then the remaining amount of money, if you go through the bill, will be channeled to various places. Among them, the person that gets the lion's share is sports fund, if we actually get that amendment passed. Mr. Speaker, then I asked a question to sports fund. What is your mandate?